back to my channel, everyone. Today we'll be making a classic Yemeni Thamool recipe as well as a modern twist, a multigrain version. So please subscribe to my channel. Thank you for your support and let's get started. So starting off with a multigrain recipe, I'm starting with white flour, wheat flour, barley flour, lentil flour, and doesn't matter what type. If you don't have lentil flour, you can replace it with barley, and some cornmeal. Now I'm adding yeast, and don't worry, all the measurements will be in the link down below. Now I'm adding a few tablespoons of sugar, some salt, and baking powder. Now get ready to attach the bowl to your mixer, and I like to use this paddle attachment because I feel like it combines things really well. We'll eventually be needing it on the surface, but for now I'm going to gradually add my olive oil on medium-low speed, and we want to do this slowly so that it incorporates very well. And then I'm adding warm water. I know it looks hot, but it's not. The warm water will help everything come together, and you may drizzle a little bit on your counter, but that's okay. Mixing that in, and I just decided that I want to also add a cup of flaxseed. This is ground flaxseed. It'll just add to the richness. Now the water, I'll give you a range in the description down below, but what you're looking for is a thick batter. Now what we'll do is we'll scrape down the sides and generously flour our surface. What's great about this recipe is that it's very versatile. You really have to rely on your intuition because liquids and different types of multigrains really vary depending on the region that you live in and how coarse those grains are. So kind of use your best judgment. Here you'll see that I felt like the dough was a little bit too sticky, so I added some additional white flour. So you're just going to keep kneading it once it all comes together. And it feels nice and soft. So you see there, as I poke it through, it kind of bounces back nicely and it's no longer sticky. So now I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil in this bowl. I'm going to transfer the kneaded dough in there, cover it up, and let it rest. This is really important for the yeast to do its magic. I also like to put a little bit of olive oil on the top. Think of it as a protective layer. And yeah, so I'm going to set this aside, and after 30 to 40 minutes, it puffed up a little bit. It's not one of those doughs that will double up entirely. And so I'm reflouring my surface, dumping that on, and you can see how it's deflating. And just using my palms, I'm going to generally flatten it out, but then roll it out evenly with a roller. And this part is always really satisfying. Now the thickness is pretty much up to you. I like to think about how much I want to bite into them, and I like to use a cookie cutter. I find it the easiest and fastest way. I also like that this one in particular has these cute little scallops. Ta-da! All right, and so now I'm just gonna transfer them to a parchment lined baking sheet. You don't need any oil. I find that parchment paper is the best way to cook thamool. So with some egg wash, I'm going to generously brush each thamool. Make sure you get those edges because you want it to brown evenly all over. Once all of those are nicely coated, I'm going to add some black seeds. They're technically called nigella seeds. In Arabic, it's habba soda, or some people call it habbat al-baraka. They do have a strong flavor. I enjoy them. Some people don't. So you may want to replace perhaps with sesame seeds. All right, we're going to put them in the oven. And once they come out, they're beautifully browned, slightly crunchy on the bottom, but they're still very fluffy on the inside. So make sure you let them rest. And let them cool off, not too long so that they don't get stale, but once you're ready, start arranging them in whatever dish you like. I'm using this traditional hand woven Yemeni basket just for presentation's sake, and I like to kind of layer them up this way. So this is the more modern multi-grain recipe, and I want to move on and show you how to make the classic. So here I have some warm water, and I will sprinkle on a layer of yeast. And I don't know scientifically why this is, but they say if you sprinkle it onto the surface this way and let it sink to the bottom and froth up, the yeast will activate better. So do that, set it aside, and now we are combining our white flour. And again, link will be down below with all of the measurements. A little bit of wheat flour and cornstarch, salt, sugar, and I'm gonna use a wooden spoon. So traditionally, people either use their hands or a wooden spoon. This is also great if you don't have a KitchenAid, then you don't really need it. And I'm just gonna combine all of the dry ingredients. Now moving on to the stove, I am melting down a hunk of butter. Traditionally, people may also use a combo of ghee and butter. So work with what you have. And we want to melt this down on low to medium heat all the way until it's a full liquid. Make sure it's on low heat because you don't want the butter to brown. You just want it to froth up. And now we're adding some vegetable oil and allowing the two to combine and come to a very low simmer altogether. Now I'm making a well in the middle of our dry mix, and I'm going to pour in the warm butter and oil, and using that same wooden spoon I'm going to gently combine the two. You want to be careful not to overmix because that can easily make the dough dense. So just enough that everything is starting to combine, and then I want to make sure that I want to grab that water and the yeast that we prepared early on. In total, you want to make sure that it has foamed up for 10 to 15 minutes. And then I'm also adding 2 scrambled eggs. Scrambled, I mean mixed. And then continue to work that into the dough. Just until you feel like everything has soaked in well enough, and then you can kind of transfer to using your hands. So now that everything's well combined, I'm adding some black seeds. I just eyeballed it. If you don't like the flavor, you don't have to add as much. And now I'm just kneading it roughly with my hands and transferring it over to a floured surface. It just makes things easier so that you have more control over the dough. I like to add some olive oil onto my palms so that the kneading process goes a little bit more smoothly. And so, like I said, we don't want to overwork the dough. We just want to make sure that we're bringing it together and creating a smoother texture. So don't go too crazy. Take your time with it and kind of form it into one big ball. So now back into the bowl it goes. Same thing, we want to allow it to rest, so I'm just going to cover it with a dish towel. All right, so it's been about 20 to 30 minutes. You can see that it is a lot softer. When I press it in between my hands, it holds nicely. Okay, so just pull apart, and this is the easiest and most traditional way to do it. Kind of roll it around in your hand to make sure that it all holds together and flatten it. And that's pretty much it. Again, I'm using the parchment paper because this way you don't have to add a lot of oil. Traditionally, people will slather on a generous amount of olive oil, but I don't like to do that. Another traditional method is to kind of slap the dough in between your hands, just like I demonstrated. And that's it. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So before we put these in the oven, I am brushing each Thamool biscuit with egg wash. And then it's going to go into the oven at 350 degrees until they are beautifully golden on top and nice and crisp on the bottom. On the inside, you'll see that they're fluffy to the touch, but still pretty dense. I recommend letting them cool down completely. That's the traditional way of enjoying them. I sometimes cheat a little bit and I'll have them warm. Again, what's great about these Thamool is they last a really long time. So as long as you have them in a nicely sealed container, they'll last a good amount of time, like 7 to 10 days. My parents even enjoy them longer. So here just demonstrating again after they have cooled how nice and dense they are. I personally enjoy them with either honey or jam, but traditionally it's just eaten with some tea. Red tea is the most traditional thing, or coffee, but I love it with some milabban tea, which is a spiced chai, Yemeni style. Also want to show you what these multigrain dhimools look like. It's softer, so it has kind of a bounce to it. These are my personal favorite. They're not as dry, I would say. Not that the others are dry, but it's just a preference. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for my future Melabban tea video, which I think you'll really love.